Today is June 22nd, 2012. Got the grandkids over at my parents' house, including my kids. A little bit of noise in the background, but y'all wanted a higher resolution video of my dad and mom's solar home. We'll be talking about 7 different designs or principles that they have in the solar home. So excuse the background noise. This is my dad's website, allanstime.com/solar home, capital S, capital H, or you can just Google Allans solar home or even Allans solar and it'll pull this page up, first link. Used to be you could type in solar home in Google and this was one of the first 3 links that came up. This is just a schematic showing the home. The 6 different principles shown here. There's another one that's been added since this diagram. Number 1 is that we've got coming through the south-facing window that's right up here in the home. You've got the sun comes in and he hits the trom wall, which is in the middle of the home, and heats that up during the day. In the winter, when you have the low angle of the sun, and that then radiates out in the infrared, the radiant energy at night and when the sun's not shining, and that's basically the thermal flywheel for the house. There's no furnace in this home, and it's able to stay adequately warm throughout the winter. They do have a wood-burning stove to top things off, but don't have to use it very often, because usually the coldest days are also the sunniest days. And when you have a cloud cover, you don't get the sun, but you also doesn't get as cold because the cloud basically insulates the earth when you have cloud cover. So that tends to work in your favor. Number 2 is they've got the solarium out there where you get more heat gain, and there's an eave there also that blocks it in the winter or in the summer when you don't want the sun. And that hot air rises, goes up through these little tubes through the living room, and then cool air drops and returns through the floor joists to complete the cycle over there, and it's number 2. Number 3 is just a photovoltaic system, typical PV panels, nothing exotic there. 4 is a thermal panels, also nothing exotic there. 5 is unusual. These are eutectic salts inside of a chamber in the basement that melt at 70 degrees, which is, comfortable room temperature. So you have your phase change going on at 70 degrees, and the hot air off of those rises, goes through the floor joist, comes back through some ductwork through the ground to then return cycle. That's passive as well. That's kind of something my dad developed in Boulder before they moved here to Fountain Green. And then number 6 is called the burn principle, where you tie into the Earth's temperature. You insulate the house into the ground so that you are tying into the year-round the same temperature of the Earth. And then there's a garden thing we'll talk about, and then there's also a geodesic dome. So that's an overview of what we're going to be talking about here today. Actually, there's the 7th one here before the actually I think we're talking about 9 different nominally solar principles. Number 7 is not shown on this diagram, is a air conditioning system where on the right side of this picture there's a tube that comes out of the ground into a vegetative area which gets evaporative cooling going on, and it goes 40 feet through the ground into a basement room. So that's your cool air intake, and then on the top of the house, on the east and the west of the house, are 2 towers that are lined on the inside with black tin glass, and that gets really hot, and that then is hot air out on the top, sucks the hot air out of the top of the house, and then brings the cool air in from the basement. That's a passive air conditioner. Works fairly well. Okay, this is my dad, David Allen. He's going to explain the first principle, the trom wall.
Okay, this trome wall is solid masonry. It's 1 foot thick, totally filled with concrete and rebar. It's structurally a very important part of the house, but it's what we call our central heating system. It's 66 feet long and 22 to 25 feet high, going down to the downstairs as well as to support the ceiling. And these windows are positioned both as to their height and with respect to the eave, so that as you utilize the 23.5 degree tilt angle of the Earth as it goes around the sun, the first part of October, the sun starts to shine on this wall, and it goes up all the way up to those lights for the winter solstice around December 21st, and then comes back down and turns off the end of March. So we have full sun in the winter and no sun in the summer. And you have about 800 watts per square meter from the sun, and so you have all that energy, and most of it's in the optical region of the spectrum. So that works really well to come through the glass and then come into this trome wall. I told my sweetheart when we built the house, she could pick any color of brick she liked as long as it was dark. Because you have what's called black body absorption in physics, and so when it's dark, why it pulls that energy in the optical region of the spectrum, and then at night, due to whatever temperature it's at, it re-radiates. And if you look at the black body radiation law, it will tend to radiate if we're at 68 degrees, for example, in the infrared. And infrared is a very desirable radiation because the body absorbs that most readily. Radiant heat is the most comfortable heat. You have 3 kinds of heat transfer that can occur: radiation, convection, and conduction. And radiation is like the glow of the coals of a fire at a campfire at night. Very pleasant, and the body absorbs that energy very readily. We're very good black body absorbers and black body radiators, and so this is a very comfortable heat in the wintertime. You can feel that wall radiate when it's loaded with thermal energy, with solar energy in the wintertime with a good long solar day. The typical home in America uses convection, air convection, and if you look at the physics of that, it's one of the poorest ways to transfer heat, because air has a very low heat capacity, so you have to move a lot of air to get a home heated from a furnace, and using natural gas, for example. And when the wall gets heated up from the air moving, why the thermostat will turn off, and if the air is not warmer than about 95 degrees, it feels cool to the body because of evaporative cooling. When you have moving air, why it has to be hot or it feels cool to you. In this case, where you don't have moving air, you can be at 68 degrees and be very comfortable, because there's no flowing air, no air currents or movement. And so the thermostat in a traditional home will turn off as soon as the wall temperature is up to whatever temperature you set your thermostat at. And it turns off, and then the heat immediately dissipates into the wall, so the furnace kicks back on. And you have this crazy cycle where you have to move a lot of air, which has very low heat capacity. So it's absolutely undesirable physics.
Wouldn't you say that the trome wall alone could make a huge difference in the heating, in the heating signature of the country? If people were to integrate this, it's a very low cost.
Yeah, totally passive, but totally friendly, and it's part of the construction of the home, and so it's worked out very well. We call this, again, our central heating system. The heat capacity of brick is not that great. It's about 0.2 calories per gram per degree centigrade. water is 1 calorie per gram per degree centigrade. So water has 5 times the heat capacity as does brick, but you can't build a wall out of water very well, so you can't use it.
You've got high ceilings here, and if you had air convection heating, you would lose most of your heat going up into the height. But where you have this radiant energy, you don't have that effect, correct?
Yeah, because you're getting your energy from radiation rather than from convection, so you don't. I mean, you do get some convection just naturally in the house, but that's not a problem because everything's passive. The second system is these tubes. There are 5 of them. They're 30 inches by 2 feet, 24 inches, and they're open-throated, and they basically allow the air to go from the solarium. You can see the vent holes for these, and they go all the way through the trom wall into the north side of the house. So in the winter time, this solarium, with the winter sun going down at low angles, this room will get up to as high as 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it gets very warm, very toasty in here, and so that hot air naturally rises, creates a hydrostatic pressure, and it pushes that hot air through these open-throated vent tubes. Then
And I notice there's a return air here, and there's 6 of those too?
I forgot, I think there are 6.
And those go through the floor
There are
joists?
actually more than that, if you look at all of them. So that air goes across, and you can see one of these coming through the trom wall here. And if, for example, in the wintertime, you hold a Kleenex up there in front of that, you'll see it naturally wafted out from the natural convection, because when the hot air gets to the north side of the house, it drops because it cools, and then it goes through those French doors or through the floor joists. So you have this natural convection all the time when the sun is shining to move the hot air from the solarium to the north side of the house. We have one for a bedroom and one for the master bath. And, that system has worked really well. It's totally passive and creates a nice level of heat in the living area on the north side of the house. The next system is photovoltaic.
Really quick, in talking about this passive solarium system, this is also something that could be nominally cheaply integrated into most homes.
Just a natural design, yeah. Using the solariums are common in people's homes, but to utilize it so it moves the air passively would make a lot of sense, and it's not that hard to do.
And in the summertime, when you don't want it, you're not even sealing those off because
it turns out that as the sun comes up in the summertime, the amount of energy that comes through the glass is a function of the angle. So as the angle gets high, you get a lot of reflection off the glass. So this room does not get hot in the summertime. So it's not a problem for summer heating. So it basically turns off in the summertime, just like the trom wall. So it turns off in the summer and turns on in the winter naturally from the tilt angle of the earth.
what latitudes do you think could get away with this? Because if you're at the equator, obviously you have different angles and different dynamics.
Totally different conditions. So it's going to work best at the higher latitudes where it turns off and on. But you have to think about it. Basically the sun angle and the heating and cooling are a function of the latitude, and you can design a home for any latitude if you wish, and it's just a matter of utilizing the angle.
Just how big you make that eave on the...
Yeah, this was calculated specifically for 40 degrees north, and you could calculate it for any latitude of your home.
Okay.
It could be used well. I mean, there's no reason it can't be used at high latitudes as well as low latitudes. I think this is a nice latitude, 40 degrees. It gets 20 below here in the wintertime, and it'll get, today for example, it's in the 90s. And
It'll get up to 105 in the hottest days of the summer in here.
yeah,
We'll talk about the cooling system in a minute. Let's go see the PV system. Solariums. Those are pretty big windows. How tall are those windows?
They're 6 by, they're different sizes. They're 30 inches and I think 4 feet, 48, 36, 3 feet and 4 feet, I believe. They alternate.
Uh-huh. Let's stand out of the okay, I'm good right here. Got a bit of breeze here. Hopefully you can hear.
The photovoltaic is pretty traditional. It's a 1 kilowatt system, 24 volt, feeds the solar energy into a battery bank and inverters so that we can sustain the home on an emergency basis. We're not running all of our energy from it because at the time we built the home it was too costly. So we basically just have enough for emergency backup. But it's worked well. We put this in 92 and it's still working fine. I've replaced the batteries once.
You've got it so that you can change the angle. Do you do that very often?
Not at all. I configured it so that it averages out over the course of the sun's travel, so I don't have to move the panels.
Okay.
Just a good average basis and it's worked fine. The hot water panels you can see here.
There's one of those towers on the west side of the house. There's a full photovoltaic system. And this is the solar thermal system. And we'll get out of the wind here. Go ahead and explain the solar thermal system.
The hot water panels, there are 6 of them.
You've got backlighting if you could come over here. Okay.
It's such a beautiful background. There are 6 of them. They're 4 feet by 8 feet. And this supplies all of our hot water for culinary purposes and also the heating, radiant heating for the 3 bathrooms. So there's 300 gallons of hot water storage and that then is thermostatically controlled for the bathrooms, so it provides extra heating for the bathrooms in the house.
I understand the solar thermal systems are one of the most efficient uses of energy because it captures the most and then we can return the most. But cost-wise, it's a little more expensive, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, you can't even buy this glass anymore. It's a shame. If people were interested at all in doing good solar, it would be readily available. But for whatever reason, you can't buy the glass. This is a high transmissivity glass, specifically designed for efficient storage of solar energy, and you can't even buy it. So it's crazy. I don't know why.
We're standing underneath the solarium right now, and let's go look at the batteries for a second and the inverter. This is by far the most expensive solar component, isn't it?
The photovoltaic altogether back in '92 cost about $20,000. This is an old system. I've replaced the batteries once.
This is built in '92?
Yes. And it's worked fine.
This rack used to be filled with 24 volt deep cell or 12 volt. They're about the size of a car battery. Now you've got it down into this one rack.
Yeah, I replaced these just a few years ago. Need to clean the terminals, but you have to fill the batteries a couple of times a year to make sure the water is up to where it should be. This is this system basically allows you to have electrical backup for the hot water system, which is the only active system. There are 3 pumps on the hot water system, one carrying propylene glycol for
the
so
antifreeze.
It doesn't freeze. It's an antifreeze. And it carries the heat into the house through a heat exchanger. Another pump takes that water that receives energy from the propylene glycol and puts it into the water tanks. And then there's a 3rd pump the pumps into the bathrooms for heating those. And those pumps can be run from this system, so in an emergency basis, we don't need the grid to keep functioning.
In a percentage basis, how much would you say that the thermal system contributes to the heating of the home in terms of the ambient heat?
The main heating is going to come from the first two, from the trum wall and from the solarium, because you have the most solar energy coming through those systems. The hot water, of course, gets utilized for culinary purposes as well as just the bathrooms. And I think percentage-wise it may be 20% or something of the ambient heating is supported.
Primarily in the basement.
Well, for the bathrooms. Hot water typically will go to the bathrooms for culinary purposes.
But it's also heating the bathrooms, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
A 50-gallon hot water heater, and then these 125.
That's regular propane water heater there.
Yes, that's
and
backup.
that tops it off, right?
It's just backup. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have to have that. It's just an emergency backup. And so the hot water, the propylene glycol comes through this heat exchanger, and then the other pump circulates through these big tanks, and it was exchanged here through this heat exchanger to convert the heat from the sun to hot water in these tanks. And then the third pump is up there for supplying the hot water for the bathrooms and for culinary purposes.
Now we're going to go into the eutectic chamber, which you can see in the summertime is partially shaded from the solarium, but in the wintertime would be getting full sun. We're going to go into this little door here.
Remodeling this one, these tubes contain Glauber's salt, sodium sulfate decahydrate. They are black, obviously, so that they pull in the solar energy. And the windows, again, are positioned and designed so that when I have this rack full of these Glauber salts, it acts like a radiator. And so it, you can see the idea here, it's fully loaded. So you have these black tubes stacked up inside of this rack, receiving winter solar energy. And in contrast to the brick, which has 0.2 calories per gram per degree centigrade, the heat of fusion of the Glauber salts is 80 calories per gram. So you would have to go through, you'd have to go through 400 degrees centigrade to get the same amount of heat from water as you would from the eutectic salts. So the heat storage capacity of salts that from the phase change from liquid to solid is one of the most efficient that you can find.
This is another technology which is not really appreciated right now, and you can't even get these in the U.S. Didn't you have to get this from the U.K.?
Yes. In fact, these came to New Jersey, to Denver, and I called up Denver when I learned they had some, and they said, nobody wants them, you can have them for half price. I said, I'll be down. So I went down and bought everything they had and used them in Boulder while we were there. There's some question about the stability long term. Dr. Maria Telka's developed it originally. She had patents and papers describing how this was used. She built a home at the University of Delaware based on these Glauber salts, and it seemed to work well. You have to concern yourself with three things, and one is that it tends to supercool, and so she uses borax to act as a nuclei to get it so it doesn't supercool, so the nuclei then form the crystallization at the desired temperature. These melt at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, So it's a very desirable temperature for storing energy. So when the winter sun comes in, it heats up the salts at 90 degrees, it turns it into liquid. So then you store that 80 calories per gram, and then at night when it freezes, why it dumps that 80 calories per gram into the environment. And so we use this passively again to go through the floor joists, through vents into 4 rooms in the downstairs, and then it passively convects back into this eutectic chamber.
Now today is pretty warm in here. I guess it's about 95 degrees in here.
About the same as it is outside.
Yeah, and yet you don't have any blocking of these vents in the summer. Is that not a problem?
It has been a problem because it only gets hot in the wintertime, because when the sun goes down, because it's protected by the floor of the solarium. Mm-hmm. So it naturally convects in the wintertime and turns off in the summertime.
But wouldn't you be getting some convection even now?
You know, you can control your vents if you need to, but we haven't had to worry about it.
Huh. And how much, price-wise, if this were to catch on, what kind of prices are we talking about with this eutectic salt?
Water salts are inexpensive. This could be made very inexpensively if people were serious. Again, there's a question about long-term stability that hasn't really been answered.
Well, you've had them 15 years?
Oh no, we've had them for like 25 years.
Okay, and no problems yet?
Well, I haven't done careful measurements to know that the heat capacity, heat diffusion are still the same as they were, but they seem to be working. So I don't know whether they've deteriorated or not. As near as I can tell, they're still okay. But again, one would like to do some careful scientific experiments to determine that, but it seems to work.
What kind of, the panels that you've got here?
Again, this is your high transmissivity glass, which you can't buy anymore. I busted one of the glass panels, and I tried to replace it, and I could not find any. So I had to replace it with standard glass, which is low transmissivity and clear, and so it's not desirable. But that's all I could find. I have, this room is an R40 wall and floor, so it's able to store the energy extremely well. So once I get the energy in here in the wintertime, it goes into the house. So I basically lose almost nothing to the cold environment in the wintertime.
And this is primarily just heating the one side of the house, but then it's going to be transmitting over through convection to the other side?
Basically just the downstairs. There are 4 rooms heated by this eutectic chamber. We have 2 bedrooms down here and a lab and my wife's hobby room, and they're heated by this eutectic chamber room.
Okay.
And in the wintertime you can put your hand up to the vent there and you can feel this nice warm air coming from the sunshine. It works great.
Okay, we're outside again. We're going to talk about the solar air conditioner. There's one on the east and west side of the house, those towers, lined on the inside with black tin. I don't see the black tin now, is it?
We've only activated the east one. We found it was adequate. It's quite a bit of work to do it, so we just did the one, and it seems to be adequate for our temperatures in the summertime. So the glass is 8 feet high and 30 inches wide, has black tin immediately behind it, and so the sun shines through and heats that black metal and torches the air in the throat. And in the summertime I open the vent at the bottom of the throat so that hot air can rise, vent out through those vents at the top of the chimney. So it sucks air out of the house from the downstairs, and we have downstairs windows as well as a special culvert which goes down 15 feet.
Yeah, let's go look at that right now.
this is the north side of the house, and we can open these downstairs windows to let cool air in from the north side. We also have this 15-inch culvert that goes down 15 feet and then in 30 feet into what we call Sterling's old bedroom, where he used to be before he was married. And the funny story there, you'll remember, is he had his office in his bedroom, and it got so cool in the summertime he had to put his jacket on, because that nice cool air from this evaporative cool area would go getting the 54 degree underground temperature and then go in through his bedroom and be pulled by that black chimney up through the stairs and through the house. And so it's a passive solar air conditioner that allows us to keep the home cool in the summertime. So we basically open up that throat in the summertime and then turn it off in the fall.
One of the things that I do in my home is I open up the windows at night and then close them in the morning, so you're pulling in the cool night air. We're in the canyon area, so we can do that. And you don't have to turn on the air conditioner until about 5 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Do you do any of that, opening windows at night?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get up in the morning and open doors and let the air. It's really fun because when the sun's shining on that chimney, you can stand at the bottom of the stairs and you can feel that cool air venting up through the house.
Let's go take a look at the geodesic dome, which is right over here.
Okay, the last heating principle for the home we call the berm principle. At this latitude, 40 degrees north, if you go down about 2 meters, 5, 6, 7 feet, you get constant temperature year-round. At this latitude, it's about 54 degrees, summer, winter, night, day. And so the idea is that if you build a home with a foundation going down 5, 6 feet, then you insulate on the outside of the foundation so that you keep the cold winter temperatures from coming into the concrete foundation. Then that concrete on the inside of that insulation will couple into the 54 degree berm temperature. And if I had a perfectly insulated dome, my home would be 54 degrees doing nothing else. So all you have to do is add another 14 degrees on top of that Fahrenheit to get to 68, which would be very comfortable. And you'd have, with no other heating things, you could just live in that environment very comfortably. We did an experiment here a couple of winters ago just to see how well that worked, and we went through a whole winter without any fire in our fireplace, and we did fine. And it got 20 below, and it got down into the 50s, but it never got really uncomfortable. We could put sweaters and coats and jackets and whatever, and we did fine. My wife and I are both kind of tough, but we made it through really well. Typically we'll build 3 or 4 fires in the fireplace over the course of a winter, but it's more for ambience than it is. It's usually when we have company that we'll do that. So the home basically is insulated on the outside of the foundation down 5, 6 feet all the way around, except for the storage area where we want to keep it cool.
That's where the that entry is for the conduit, or the culvert pipe.
The culvert comes down into the Sterling's old bedroom.
And we'll talk about those chips in a minute. Now out to the geodesic dome. Here we are at the geodesic dome. We'll go inside for a minute. And what do you want to say about that?
Well, I borrowed this from the city manager. We actually were in here earlier, and I didn't have my record button on, so this is take 2 in the geodesic dome. I was saying, started out by saying that geodesic dome is nothing new,
my dad corrected me that there are some things that he's integrating here that are unusual or new.
Going back, the geodesic was invented by Buckminster Fuller in the 60s, and there are millions of them around the Earth. It's the strongest minimum strength, maximum strength, minimum material edifice that you can build. Made out of triangles, you have this section of a sphere. There are 75 panels in groups of 5. The geometry here is really intriguing when you dig into it in detail. And so it's designed for greenhouse purposes by Parsons, who is in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. And we bought this from him as a kit. And then what you do on the inside is your own thing. The geodesic basic kit comes with 800 gallons of water storage where you can put fish or whatever, and that gives you some thermal capacity as well. And then there are you have these vent tubes which are solar driven to pull hot air down through the grow beds, and a solar panel up on the south side drives a little fan to suck that air through the grow beds, so it heats up the grow beds during the daytime so that they're warmer at night, and so that provides some additional thermal storage in the grow beds. The kit also comes with 2 vent windows and 2 intake windows, and you see on them a cylinder which has a thermally expansive wax, and that wax expands when it gets hot, so they naturally open and then close at night. So it's again a passive ventilation system that vents the greenhouse when it gets quite warm.
Does that ever malfunction?
I've replaced, I think over the course, we've had this for like 6-7 years. I think I've bought maybe 4 or 5 of those replacements. They do malfunction. You do have to replace them. I've gotten some new ones that are up there that withstand the wind really well. The older ones tended to get torn apart in high wind situations. These have worked really well. They tend to not flop around in the high winds. Anyway, when we built this, in designing our own system, we did some innovative things that have worked out quite well. Because you get the outside walls in the kit, but what you do on the inside is your choice. And so all of the grow boxes are what we did in addition to the kit. And knowing that the berm principle worked well on our home, I felt to include it as an innovative addition to what Buckminster Fuller's original geodesic would do, or Parsons' greenhouse design. Utgard has a 2-foot wall on the outside with tin, keeping the moisture out of it. And so what I did was go down another 3 feet with concrete and gravel, and then I insulate on the outside, and then I put dirt up against the outside of this 2-foot wall. So I've got a 5-foot insulation going down to catch the berm temperature. So basically this foundation for the geodesic is coupled into the berm temperature at 54 degrees. So that acts like heating in the winter and cooling in the summer by coupling into that berm temperature that we have at this latitude. And so that goes all the way around. And I did kind of a fun thing. Rather than go to an expensive concrete forms and structure and whatever, I simply dug with a spade where these walls would go, the width of a spade, and put my feet sideways so I could stand in there while I was digging down a 3-foot trench. Interesting project to build this circle to go all the way around for this foundation, and then use the dirt for the form, and then put insulation before I put the gravel and the concrete with reinforcement bar so that I could hook into the 2-foot wall. And that's worked really well as a little innovative addition. I've done another fun thing here that that I think is quite unique. We know that the arch is a very solid thing. We have an archway on our entryway. The keystone of an arch makes that circle totally strong if you have good support structures on each end of an arch. And so I'm using the arch principle for these grow boxes. And in here I have 2x2s construction. So it's a very cheap material. And this is just cedar fencing cut on an angle for a little aesthetic appearance. And what I've done is created a circle here, which is like an arch. And so as the dirt pushes out against these 2x2s, they're all symmetric, and like an arch, the stress is equal. So you get no collapse of these little 2x2 sections. And so even with the pressure of the dirt and the water and all the grow box activity here, the plants growing, this has worked really well with very minimal material. And I did just the opposite on the inside. Instead of, this is under pressure, and I did this one under tension. So I have a solid 4x4 post, and this makes an exact circle here in sections of 28, 30 inches, whatever they are. And so at each junction here, the 2x2s are fastened together so that they can't come apart. So it creates, this is all under tension. And so the dirt can push out and it won't give away. So again, with just simple 2x2s, which would not withstand the pressure of the walls, it will, because it's under tension uniformly. And that's another little innovation that we added.
You're growing food year-round here through the winter.
So we eat tomatoes year-round, and the tomatoes are just out of this world.
They're really good.
They're just loaded. They're small, but loaded with flavor. You can see, for example, this one's split. I'd eat it in front of you, but I might drool.
I just had one. It was so good.
Yeah. They're small, but the flavor seems to all get compacted inside of this beautiful piece of fruit.
I'll have that.
It's almost like eating candy.
Yeah.
Wow. So good. Then you have, as part of the kit, you get this 800-gallon water storage system.
Do you have fish in here now?
Yeah, there are koi and goldfish in here. And there are several plants that do well in the wintertime. Artichokes do very well. Parsley, you can see, does extremely well. The aloe vera. So we eat artichokes a lot, and they do really well. So this artichoke bush just seems to grow like crazy. Swiss chard, you can make a whole meal out of one leaf, and it does extremely well. It'll take over if you let it. Kale does extremely well. We eat and eat. My wife makes some wonderful kale salads, and we cook it and fry it, and it's just a great food, and it does extremely well. So there's several things. Any of you, in the wintertime, any of your cabbage family, broccoli and so forth will do really well.
What's that herb over there?
This is chia.
Oh.
It's not supposed to grow here. It's in the mint family. It's typically a tropical plant. 17 degrees from the equator. It has this beautiful purple flower.
Tell us briefly about chia. You guys make a lot of chia seed trips for people, and how many tons have you hauled?
Well, a lot. We basically have the attitude to let it be a service project, to help people with their storage, because it's one of the finest foods that you can store. It has a very long shelf life, 7 years. It has the highest omega-3. It has better than any plant in omega-3, and it has the proper balance of omega-3 and omega-6, plus it has lots of vitamins and minerals. Dr. Williams did an article on it about 4 or 5 years ago, and we read it and thought, wow, this is really good stuff. So we bought a bunch in storage and preparedness, and it's an excellent, excellent food. It's easy to use. You can very mild flavor. You can put it in about anything.
Let's go see your wood chips.
Okay.
There we go. There's a photovoltaic system from the back.
In the winter time, it can get below 32 degrees in the geodesic. It radiates too strongly at night, and so you have to augment if you want to grow tomatoes, at least at this latitude, because it gets 20 below, and you can't keep tomatoes if you don't keep it well above 32 degrees. And so we've made the choice to run electricity out there with a little heater. Doesn't take much, and that way we can grow tomatoes year-round. Alternatively, you could use a panel like we have here, put some energy in some batteries and run a little DC heater, and that would work well. And so either one of those would work well to allow you to grow tomatoes and things that are more susceptible to cold temperatures. Some of the plants that we have in there tolerate freezing conditions. The kale works great in cold, and the Swiss chard, several of them don't mind if it freezes. Any of your cabbage family, your broccoli and so forth will do well with freezing temperatures. So one could add this on top of what comes with the kit if you wish to. Recently we were told about a gardening technique, one of the most inspiring that I've ever seen. Paul Gerlich up in the Olympic Peninsula has this concept. You can go to online and Google Back to Eden, and you'll find an hour-and-a-half video where he describes this gardening technique. We were so enthused about it that my wife and I, dove in big time and have been doing it for our garden. And this used to be lawn, now it's going to be both vegetables, fruits, flowers, whatever. We just finished this, and if one goes down under these wood chips, you'll find beautiful moist soil for growing whatever. He has an orchard, and they're in the shadow of the rain peninsula up there, so they only get about 16 inches plus rain per year, so it's not much different than here. And he has an orchard where he doesn't irrigate. Year-round, no irrigation, and he has this lush, beautiful fruit because the wood chips, like nature does in the forest, keeps the moisture in the ground and doesn't evaporate. So if water comes, it goes in the ground and stores. So it's a beautiful concept.
It's like a rain diode.
It's like a rain diode, exactly. So in a long, dry summer like we're having right now, we've had no rain in May and June. This will stay moist. So we're really excited about it, and we've been working like crazy to get wood chips and follow his recipe. The idea is basically that you have a gradient of decomposition. So you have wood chips on the top, and maybe 3 or 4 years later you'll put some more, and that gradually decays. And so the deeper you go, the more compost, the richer the compost, so that at the bottom the seeds have this beautiful soil where it's nice and moist. And he doesn't have to worry about potassium, mineral balance. All the minerals are there, the pH level is right, everything works in harmony just like the Lord designed it. He has this great statement: the Lord created the earth with this beautiful forests and so forth, and he designed it so he didn't have to go to work. So the weeds pull up easily. It's very easy to weed, we found that, as well as get this beautiful moisture where you can plant. I just planted some corn. It's late in the year to do it, but I was able to just push my thumb down into that wet soil and drop a seed in, and it's really beautiful.
We go take a look at your garden?
It's a whole new experience. This keystone, when we built the home, our brick mason said, "Would you like some granite from the Salt Lake Temple?" And I said, "Is this a midnight acquisition?" And they had done a remodel, and he had some extra stone from the temple as they were doing some renovation work up there. And so he got this very nice piece of stone from the Salt Lake Temple, and I had him carved with scripture, "Truth is Light," from section 84 as the keystone for our home. And it makes a very nice reminder of who really is in charge of what we do in life, for which we're most grateful.
Okay.
So this is Paul Gerlich Back to Eden gardening technique. We just put organic material down, manure underneath, and then some rotten hay and some wood chips on top, growing potatoes and wheat. Over here we just planted some corn. It's really easy to plant, and just laid the chips down. We're planting really late in the year. We're hoping for a late fall. Took us a long time to get stuff together. But again, the chips hold the moisture extremely well. And if you want some horseradish, come get some.
Of course, gardening is the first solar technology of mankind.
So, my wife does a great job taking care of the greenhouse and all the herbs. So we eat fresh, lots of wonderful things, thanks to the good Lord providing.
Live across the
such
street from
abundance.
State Trooper. Watch your back, right?
Great friend. Paul says all he needs is a rake for doing this kind of gardening. No tillers needed, don't have to till the soil. This is basically your basic tool.
And we don't know that he wants to advertise, but it's a solar mole eradicator. It vibrates in the ground, it's supposed to keep the moles away, but he doesn't think it works very well. You hear it go off once in a while. You hear it's like a vibrate mode on a cell phone. There it goes.
And out of green material, they would work great. Nice thing about wood chips is they don't blow away in the wind. And they, again, act like a moisture rain diode. They put the rain and the moisture in the ground and keep it there. This stuff is a year old. We actually bought this from Provo. So it's wood chips that have been decayed some, so you can put it down below the stuff that you have on top.
On these 8 or 9 different principles we talked about, 2 of them being, ancient, going back, if you were to do these over again, what would you do differently if you were to, or maybe modify what you have now to improve it?
The trauma wall works well. The one downside of the design that we have here, and I actually had a way to deal with that in the design, but we didn't do it. These high windows tend to be thermally lossive, and so I was going to put a catwalk across and have curtains that would be thermally actuated, so that they would come down at night to keep the warm air in the house. And so we never did that. So we get quite a bit of heat loss out those windows at night. And so it would be good to have some way to curtain those during the nighttime.
And to dress it out, you're talking about basically having a railed system going across there?
Yeah, for servicing, I was going to have it so it was automatic, and I wouldn't have to get up there every night and lower them in the morning and raise them up again. So it would always be automatic, but and work off the battery system. And I'd have the catwalk just for servicing and maintenance of what would be there. But we never built that into the house and just left it as it is. And we can tell that there is some significant heat loss through those windows. On the solarium passive convection system to move the hot air from the south side to the north side, That works well. I don't think I would change much of anything. I've been very impressed with the one that heats the bathroom, keeps the bathroom nice and cozy, and for the bedroom, and these three here for the living area. And that part of the house has worked very nicely. I don't think I would change much there.
I mentioned earlier that I have to brag because I painted the grain on these. Actually, I think we got that recorded. Just basically
Did a great job.
Followed the grain that was there and accentuated it. Go ahead.
The third system, the photovoltaic, desirably, if money were available, I would have it run the whole house so we could be off the grid. With a 1 kilowatt system, it was inadequate to do that, and so we just had it for emergency backup. So certainly I would like to be more independent so that I didn't have to be on the grid at all. Now I'm on the grid, and only if the grid goes down do I'm in emergency standby, and that works fine. But it would be better to have it be totally independent. The hot water panel system works well. We had it in Boulder. We've had that system for a long time, and it's been quite functional and quite serviceable. The radiant heaters in the bathrooms, maintenance on those there's been some issues there. And I have to do some maintenance on the pumps occasionally. I have a very good friend, Randy Tolbert, who helps me maintain the system, and with fairly minimal maintenance every few years or so, checking the propylene glycol level and a few things like that. But it's been a functional system.
We just put in a plug, an advertisement plug for Randy Tolbert. He was my landlord before we moved in this most recent move, and he's got a solar company. If you go to pezwiki.com and type in Randy Tolbert, you'll see his page. I'm having a hard time remembering the name of the company right now, but he does anything from Ogden down to St. George.
Swimming pools, whatever, solar homes.
Yeah, very knowledgeable.
Very, very knowledgeable, and he's very clever. I mean, he's very creative. He has lots of neat, fun ideas. Randy and I met while I was building this home, and he helped me with the hot water system. And we both said we wished we'd have known each other sooner. Some of the ideas that we have in this home he wished he had in his, and some of the ideas he has in his home we wished we had in ours. But a very creative and capable guy. The eutectic salts, I think the design we have there, it has worked well, and I think when I get this modification done it will work well. There's one thing we did not mention, and that is that it needs a curtain so that you don't lose energy at night. And I have that curtain, and I'll have that also working off batteries so that it's automatically actuated to keep the heat in during the nighttime. So that part, it's actually of all the systems we have, that's the only one that we haven't fully completed. The burn principle works really well. The passive solar air conditioner, we have another chimney should we need it, and so far we've only had to actuate the one. We only have to open that up once a year and close it in the fall, so it's very simple to use. And everything else in the house is basically controlled by opening and closing doors and windows. So our thermostat is a function of where you want the heat or where you want the cool. You open a door, you close a window, open a window, and let the air flow accordingly. So it's a pretty simple system. The geodesic dome is a good concept for strength, but there is, I think, a better way to do a greenhouse. And if you go on the web and look for Walipini, W-A-L-I-P-I-N-I, it's I think Ketchikan word for the warm place that was developed in South America.
Yeah, I'll put a hot link to the interview I did with you about that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and it can be done, I think, less expensively and with better thermal storage. We haven't yet, well, actually this home is almost like a Wallapini. But anyway, that concept, and they have a 31, 32 page manual on how to build one of those. It's been so successful as part of the BYU Benson Institute program that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has integrated it into their welfare program. And so we're looking at actually trying to experiment with one of those sometime soon, because we think it will be more efficient and perhaps we won't have to have any augmentation for heat in the wintertime.
Really quick on a tangent, I noticed you've got some kind of, is that a plug-in heater system there?
Yeah, we can add a little heat. It's just a little electric heater.
Uh-huh.
So in the living area, sometimes we'll turn that on.
Just a lazy man heater.
Yeah. And let me mention in conjunction with the Wallapini concept, this home is very much like the Wallapini concept. And we never even get close to freezing. We've never even been close to freezing. I don't think it's ever gone into the 40s. And so, you know, the concept, and it's basically all passive. So it's, I think the Wallapini concept is more thermally efficient than the geodesic, I guess is what I'm saying.
My clock is telling me I've got about 2 minutes left on my battery, so let's closing thought here.
To me, in terms of independence, being able to grow your own food, and I think this concept of Paul Gerlich, I would encourage everybody to go and watch that hour-and-a-half movie on Back to Eden. You'll find it very inspiring, and if you wish to be independent, being able to have fresh, wonderful produce that you can eat. There's also a guy in Alpine, Utah that's written this book, Caleb Warnock, Forgotten Skills. He was grown up in a home where they raise their food year-round, and he knows how to do it. And in Alpine, which is 6,000 feet, he lives off of his produce year-round. And he has a home that is totally self-sufficient and grows all of his own food. So there's lots of fun opportunities out there, and you can buy this book from Costco at a discount.
Okay. Thank you. Moderately same temperature of the Earth. And then there's a garden thing we'll talk about, and then there's also a geodesic dome. So that's an overview of what we're going to be talking about here today. Actually, there's a seventh one here before the, actually I think we're talking about 9 different nominally solar principles. Number 7 is not shown on this diagram, is a air conditioning system where on the right side of this picture there's a tube that comes out of the ground into a vegetative area which gets evaporative cooling going on, and it goes 40 feet through the ground into a basement room. So that's your cool air intake, and then on the top of the house, on the east and the west of the house, are 2 towers that are lined on the inside with black tin glass, and that gets really hot, and that then is hot air out on the top, sucks the hot air out of the top of the house, and then brings the cool air in from the basement. That's a passive air conditioner. Works fairly well. Okay, this is my dad, David Allen. He's going to explain the first principle, the Trom wall.
Okay, this Trom wall is solid masonry. It's 1 foot thick, totally filled with concrete and rebar. It's structurally a very important part of the house, but it's what we call our central heating system. In law, it will tend to radiate if we're at 68 degrees, for example, in the infrared. And infrared is a very desirable radiation because the body absorbs that most readily. Radiant heat is the most comfortable heat. You have three kinds of heat transfer that can occur: radiation, convection, and conduction. And radiation is like the glow of the coals of a fire at a campfire at night. Very pleasant, and the body absorbs that energy very readily. We're very good black body absorbers and black body radiators, and so this is a very comfortable heat in the wintertime. You can feel that wall radiate when it's loaded with thermal energy, with solar energy in the wintertime with a good long solar day. The typical home in America uses convection, air convection, and if you look at the physics of that, it's one of the poorest ways to transfer heat, because air has a very low heat capacity, so you have to move a lot of air to get a home heated from a furnace, and using natural gas, for example. And when the wall gets heated up from the air moving, why the thermostat will turn off, and if the air is not warmer than about 95 degrees, it feels cool to the body because of evaporative cooling. When you have moving air, why it has to be hot for it.
Today is June 22nd, 2012. Got the grandkids over at my parents' house, including my kids. A little bit of noise in the background, but y'all wanted a higher resolution video of my dad and mom's solar home. We'll be talking about 7 different designs or principles that they have in the solar home. So excuse the background noise. This is my dad's website, allanstime.com/solar home, capital S, capital H, or you can just Google Allans Solar Home or even Allans Solar and it'll pull this page up, first link. Used to be you could type in solar home in Google and this was one of the first 3 links that came up. This is just a schematic showing the home. The 6 different principles shown here. There's another one that's been added since this diagram. Number 1 is that we've got coming through the south-facing window that's right up here in the home. You've got the sun comes in and he hits the trom wall, which is in the middle of the home, and heats that up during the day. In the winter, when you have the low angle of the sun, and that then radiates out in the infrared, the radiant energy at night and when the sun's not shining, and that's basically the thermal flywheel for the house. There's no furnace in this home, and it's able to stay adequately warm throughout the winter. They do have a wood-burning stove to top things off, but don't have to use it very often, because usually the coldest days are also the sunniest days. And when you have a cloud cover, you don't get the sun, but you also doesn't get as cold because the cloud basically insulates the earth when you have cloud cover. So that tends to work in your favor. Number 2 is they've got the solarium out there where you get more heat gain, and there's an eave there also that blocks it in the winter or in the summer when you don't want the sun. And that hot air rises, goes up through these little tubes through the living room, and then cool air drops and returns through the floor joists to complete the cycle over there, and it's number 2. Number 3 is just a photovoltaic system, typical PV panels, nothing exotic there. 4 is a thermal panels, also nothing exotic there. 5 is unusual. These are eutectic salts inside of a chamber in the basement that melt at 70 degrees, which is, comfortable room temperature. So you have your phase change going on at 70 degrees, and the hot air off of those rises, goes through the floor joist, comes back through some ductwork through the ground to then return cycle. That's passive as well. That's kind of something my dad developed in Boulder before they moved here to Fountain Green. And then number 6 is called the berm principle, where you tie into the Earth's temperature. You insulate the house into the ground so that you are tying into the year-round.
It's 66 feet long and 22 to 25 feet high, going down to the downstairs as well as to support the ceiling. And these windows are positioned both as to their height and with respect to the eave, so that as you utilize the 23.5-degree tilt angle of the Earth as it goes around the sun, the first part of October, the sun starts to shine on this wall, and it goes up all the way up to those lights for the winter solstice around December 21st, and then comes back down and turns off the end of March. So we have full sun in the winter and no sun in the summer. And you have about 800 watts per square meter from the sun, and so you have all that energy, and most of it's in the optical region of the spectrum. So that works really well to come through the glass and then come into this trom wall. I told my sweetheart when I built the house, she could pick any color brick she liked as long as it was dark. Because you have what's called black body absorption in physics, and so when it's dark, why it pulls that energy in the optical region of the spectrum, and then at night, due to whatever temperature it's at, it re-radiates. And if you look at the black body radiation